Thank you, everyone. I want to welcome you tonight to this really important special session. I'm delighted that you who have shown up are here, and it's an opportunity for you and frankly for me as well to learn. And I also know that this is being televised live and will be recorded from time to time for others of those who'd like to see it as well. We have with us this evening representatives from several of our town boards and town offices. On stage with me are members of the select board, including, let's see if I get it from left to right, Eric Johnson, and George Morrow, and Paul DeRensis, Mike Giarno, and Chuck Young. We also have Tom McEnany sitting with them. Tom is our town council. We have on my right, your left, we have members, representatives from the library board and from the Sherborn Library Building Committee. To the far right, Mark Brown, Adam Page, Roger Demler, Alexis Madison, Brian Conley, Lisa Schwartz, Jim Murphy, Mary Moore, Jim Kolb, and Hank Roush. Tonight's public forum is being presented for the purpose of sharing with the townspeople of Sherborn in the most open way possible the recent history of matters relating to the construction project at our town library. I want to commend those of you who have organized this forum for sharing with the public the difficulties which the town has faced to date and to present plans for moving forward. I will first introduce to you Chuck Young, Chair of the Select Board, who will share some comments before we proceed. Presenters will include Hank Roush and Jim Kolb, who is sitting just to my right. At the conclusion of their remarks, there will be an opportunity for questions and comments. I will set the ground rules at that time. I thank you for your attendance this evening and for your interest. I know there have been many deep-seated concerns about how this project has proceeded, but know that we can all listen and share our thoughts in the most dignified and respectful manner. I look forward to listening and learning myself. Chuck Young will now offer some comment.
Thanks, George, and thanks to everyone who's come here tonight to learn more about the library project. Our public library is an important resource for all town residents, and perhaps it's the one public institution that serves everyone and is used by every generation in town. I want to commend the library, staff, and also thank the Community Center Board for working together to provide library services during this construction project. The library renovation and expansion project has encountered numerous problems that must be resolved. The Select Board has been meeting regularly with the library trustees and the Library Building Committee to understand and address these problems. The Select Board has also been advised by Sean Colleen, CMND Director, and Chris Keeney, Building Inspector, who have monitored the project closely and provided valuable oversight and information about the project. Tonight's forum is intended to give a detailed and accurate presentation of the project's history and how we can move forward to complete the library project. One of the most important issues we must address is the project budget. The project budget was estimated at $7.4 million in 2012 when the proposed library project was approved by the state. In 2015, the state awarded the project a $3.6 million construction grant. During the 3 years between approval and funding, construction costs in Massachusetts increased by between 15 and 20%. The library trustees raised $2.8 million in private donations, and the town appropriated $1 million at the 2015 annual town meeting. When the project was put out to bid in 2016, escalation of construction costs had increased the estimated project budget by $1 million. The library trustees raised an additional $1 million to cover the shortfall. Since 2017, when construction began, there have been numerous setbacks and challenges, and the estimated project budget is now $10.8 million.
Hank Roush
and Jim Cole will outline the problems and explain the budget increases in their presentations. The library trustees came to the select board and the advisory committee for guidance on how to meet this budget shortfall. The trustees proposed a special town meeting, and the select board unanimously agreed. The select board met with town council, who advised that the 2015 town meeting and subsequent town election had voted to approve borrowing $7.4 million for the project, and a second vote was not required. Town council urged the select board not to hold a special town meeting, and Tom McEnany, town council at KP Law, will discuss in detail the 2015 votes to approve borrowing $7.4 million and why another vote to appropriate additional funds is not required. All 5 members of the select board accepted town council's advice to cancel the proposed special town meeting and suggested to the library trustees that a public information session be held instead. We know that there are citizens who disagree with and are not happy with the decision to cancel the special town meeting we had proposed. I assure you that for the select board, it was not an easy decision, and it was made after lengthy consideration and debate. The consequences of not increasing the construction budget for the library project are dire. Construction would halt. The town would be required to return the $3.6 million state grant with interest, and some or all of the $3.8 million in private donations may have to be returned to donors. The town would be left with an unfinished building, which is both an eyesore and a hazard, and the cost to address this would be far more than $2.2 million. The library is the most recent public construction project undertaken by the town, and all of the town's major projects have had challenges. Public construction simply has requirements and constraints that private construction does not. The question for all of us is how to bring the library project to a successful completion. The select board believes that the fastest and most economical way forward is to appropriate additional money based on the previously authorized borrowing. Just as the 2015 appropriation of town funds for the library construction project was contingent upon A, receiving a state construction grant, and B, private donations, the select board has asked library trustees to increase contributions to the project from library endowment funds and from future fundraising. Together, these will offset a significant portion of the increased cost of the project. Hank Roush will discuss these proposals in his presentation. In addition, at the end of the project, this is typical of public construction projects, the town will seek to recover through mediation and/or litigation to determine responsibility and damages for the project costs that are attributable to the contractor and the design team. The construction contract also includes liquidated damages for construction delays and a performance bond issued by Travelers Insurance to cover incomplete or poor performance by the contractor. Now I'd like to introduce Tom McEnany, who's a partner at KB Law, counsel for the town of Sherborn, and he will summarize the opinion which has been provided to the town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were asked to render an opinion whether or not it was necessary to seek approval from town meeting to borrow additional amounts for the library project, as the select board was considering the possibility of scheduling a special town meeting for this purpose. We reviewed the prior bond authorization that was approved at the April 28, 2015 annual town meeting. Specifically, at that town meeting, the town meeting approved a library borrowing in the amount of $7,479,436. The motion, which was approved unanimously by town meeting, included 3 contingencies, all of which have been met. The first was that the town would receive a grant from the MBLC, a state agency that provides library grants. The second is that the library would deliver at least $2,845,833 in private donations. And third, a debt exclusion vote was approved. There was no provision in the motion that the amount to be borrowed by the town would be reduced by either the MBLC grant or by any donations that would be received for the project. Therefore, in my opinion, the entire $7,479,436 is available to be borrowed to pay for project costs. I note that bond counsel was independently consulted by the town and rendered an identical opinion. It is my understanding that there was a discussion at the 2015 annual town meeting that the town's portion of the project would only be $1 million. As a result, there was some discussion whether the town needed to obtain further town meeting approval before borrowing above this amount. However, as previously stated, in my opinion, such approval is not required, as the original town meeting vote in 2015 authorized a borrowing of up to $7,479,436 to fund the project. Therefore, since the town already has the authority to borrow up to this amount, which should be more than sufficient to complete the cost, to cover the cost to complete the project, and at this point the town is not seeking to borrow more than that $7.4 million, it was our recommendation that the town not seek a further town meeting vote, and instead recommended that the board schedule this public forum for the purposes of providing an update on the project, including the project budget, expenditures, anticipated additional costs to complete the project, as well as the reasons for the increase in the project budget. This would achieve the board, the select board, as well as the library trustees' goal of providing transparency concerning the project and its financing, while at the same time not seeking town meeting approval for a matter for which further authorization is not required. In summary, since town meeting has already authorized the borrowing in the amount of $7,479,436 without any offset for the MBLC grant of donations, and the town is not seeking to borrow more than this amount, that further town meeting approval would not be required. And as a result, it was our recommendation that the board schedule this forum for the purposes of providing an update to the town's people on the status of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, very much. At this time, we'll proceed with a presentation, and we're fortunate to have Hank Rausch from the Library Board speak about really the issues leading to today and what the difficulties really have encompassed. Hank?
Thanks, George, and thanks, Chuck. I will try to skim over some of the details that Chuck already covered. You'll hear a lot of these numbers over and over. Hopefully you have a lot of them in the information that's been provided to you. So, thanks for coming tonight, listening to our update and asking questions. Frankly, we're as frustrated and disappointed as anyone in town. Many things have not gone according to plan, but we're committed to delivering a quality project that will be enjoyed by Sherborn for many years. In fact, our commitment to quality has led to some of the delays. We're unwilling to accept substandard work. You may have noticed some things that have had to be taken out and replaced, and unfortunately this has happened repeatedly. There are additional issues related to errors and omissions in the original design. There are some required code changes, adjustments due to found conditions when they opened the original building up. And for a lot of the details related to that, Jim Kolb is here and he's got some details to go through to explain that. Before we get to that, I wanted to talk about a little bit of historic perspective. Our town's very fortunate. We've never really paid for a library before, not the physical building. William Bradford Homer Dowse provided a building for the library in 1914 so that the library could have its own space, having outgrown the Sherborn Townhouse, where it was located since 1860. We've also had good financial stewards, creating endowments at least since 1889, when the Greenwood Book Fund was established. In more recent times, Richard and Mary Saltonstall donated the current library in 1971. The Saltonstall Charitable Trust followed this with contributions made during the 1980s and 1990s to fund both capital and operating funds to further support the library. Wheezy and Weeks funds were donated during the same time period to support children's facilities and programming, and other donations were received to support building maintenance, landscaping, media, and programming. Thanks to so many generous donors, we raised $3.8 million from private donations, and the library trustees secured a $3.6 million state grant for the current building. The town, of course, has supported the operations of the library since its inception, but from a capital perspective, this is really the first big ask, if ever, of the town for a capital investment in the library. Moving on to the original goals of the project, in 2011, Library Director Elizabeth Johnston, along with the trustees, commenced the current library project. The key goals included renovating the library, in particular to meet building codes as well as ADA compliance. The early estimate to meet this objective, just the ADA compliance and code compliance, was $2.5 million, and this amount was set aside in the capital budget planning process for the town. The library trustees did a lot of research and determined that it would be advisable to seek a matching state grant to help enhance the library facilities. We're adding over 8,000 square feet. There are many new features being added as well. There's a children's wing, teen media room, conference and study rooms, a community meeting space that will be open after hours, updated technology, new HVAC equipment, new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, code-compliant public safety, including a new fire suppression system, staff rooms, storage, and LEED certification. To limit to the cost to the town, the library trustees decided to finance the project in what we believe was a very balanced way, seeking a third from the state grant, a third from private donations, and a third from the town, which, if I'm doing this right, gets to the $7.5 million, given the initial $2.5 million estimate for the code compliance issues. Private fundraising was even more successful than that, and we were able to reduce the town placeholder in the capital budget to only $1 million. Unfortunately, as Chuck already described, when the bid package was assembled, the cost of the project was $1 million higher than had initially been estimated back in 2012. Cost escalation was covered through additional fundraising, as well as a modest tap of the library endowment, which I will discuss in more detail later. As we approached the bidding for the project, there were some leaks with the library roof, and we determined that it made sense to do the work to fix the existing library roof while we were tearing apart and doing an addition. So we went to the town seeking $190,750 to cover this. This incremental amount, it was agreed would be financed through free cash and not additional borrowing. So what's happened to date? So in August 2016, the contract was awarded according to state competitive bidding laws, and 5-Star Building Corp was selected for the contract. Construction commenced in late December 2016, but is significantly behind schedule due to many factors outside of our control, which Jim will discuss. Though we have diligently managed the project in accordance with state laws, we've faced many problems with the general contractor and the design team, as well as other unforeseen issues. Our best estimate of the total project cost is now $10.89 million versus the original contracted amount of $8.7 million, which, as I described earlier, was already $1 million over the $7.5 million initial cost, plus the $190,750 for the additional work. Clearly, this is a lot of money, an incremental $2.2 million. Chuck already went through the consequences, the biggest of which is having to return a lot of money to the state, as well as to private donors who specifically stipulated within their donor agreements that if the project was not completed, they would like their funds back. Although things look bad, the pace of construction does appear to be improving a bit here in the last couple of weeks. You can see visible progress on the roof. There were some slides that were scanning before meeting started, and hopefully we can put up later for folks to see. There has been a lot of internal progress that's hard to see from the street. But once the building is watertight, we believe that the pace should improve. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who's going to take you through some of the key details.
Thank you, Hank. Some of the slides we have here will be similar to
You want the next one?
the next one, sorry. You'll see some of the same numbers. I will walk through them and try not to be too repetitive. One thing I want to say before I get started, I'm talking through the numbers and what we're going to do to get this project done, because that's really what we're here to talk about. In addition to the funding, we want to talk about how we're going to get this project done and bring it to a successful completion. I would say that all the members of the trustees and the library building committee, many of whom are in the industry or were in the industry, would admit that we have faced a series of challenges on this project. I would say that are somewhat anomalies related to other projects that we've been participants on, but we're dealing with them head on, and we're actually more determined than ever to try to bring to the town the kind of building and facility that we promised when we started the job. So again, I'll try not to repeat what Hank said. In the fall of 16, the bid was awarded to 5-Star Building Company. The actual bid was $6.8 million. At that time, we had $1.7 million associated for soft costs, furniture, fixtures and equipment, design, OPM fees, meaning the owner's project manager, which we are mandated to hire by the state for any project that's over $1.5 million in public construction. The temporary lease for Elizabeth and the library and the community center, insurance and storage. Our budget included a construction contingency of 5% and a project contingency of 2%. Project contingency most likely covers soft costs in most instances. The LBC prior to bid did meet regularly and review with the design team the program, the furnishings, the fixtures, all the materials that were being proposed to make sure that we were doing this in the most efficient and design-conscious manner, but also to try to make sure that the budget, the bid was going to come in at the budget that we had. And in fact, it did. However, we have obviously overrun that at the current time. So the $10.89 million is $1.1 million of increase for the construction, $900,000 for soft costs that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the bullet above. We are projecting a $200,000 project contingency. One thing I want to make clear about this new budget of $10.89, this is a projected budget. It's our best estimate at this time. We do anticipate recouping some of these costs as you've heard earlier, through negotiation and litigation at the end of the job. The project contingency is to cover any other challenges that we face that we haven't anticipated yet. So the next slide, please. So what really made the construction go up? Everybody's probably wondering that. There are many people in the industry, or folks in the audience that are probably in the industry and have watched this project languish a little bit. Some of the things that have contributed to the $1.1 million increase in construction costs include site plan changes, including ADA compliance, some changes for the public water supply. I can get into some of the detail later on what that means. We did talk about the roof design. There was some design challenges with that. We had to add a variety of things, insulation and some other design elements that increased the roof cost, as Hank said, by close to $190,000. We've had code issues that were not addressed in the original design that we also had to address with new design and some rework. And then we had errors and omissions that is part of that, MEP coordination issues on the design team side, and some unforeseen conditions in the structure itself, as well as on the site, with some ledge and some other things. So these are not excuses. We're not here to make excuses. We're trying to tell folks in the audience what we've been confronting and trying to deal with. And it's been a very challenging process. I think that part of what you'll hear later is that the building committees, as I already said, is comprised of folks that are in the industry or have been in the industry. They participate in every single owner's meeting, challenge the design team and the contractor on a regular basis. And I actually think, in some ways, as strange as this might seem, I think we're in better shape than we would have been without those folks in the room at those owners' meetings. So the increased soft costs are OPM fees, the construction administration fees associated with the architect, any legal fees, the extension of time is a contributor to all of this, as well as the lease and the storage. Next slide, please. So where are we with the schedule? That's a synopsis of the cost. The original schedule contemplated and promised by contract a December 2017 completion. Here we are at the end of 2018. There have been, and we're still not close to being, we're close to being weather tight, but we're obviously not close to finishing the job. There have been multiple schedule updates provided by the contractor, not in a timely manner, and none of those schedule updates have been met. The most recent schedule update that we received on 11/29/2018 was for June 19 completion. We're currently reviewing the validity and logic behind that. Just to give folks an idea, those of you that are in the industry, as to how much work still has to be completed. There's approximately $3.3 million worth of work that has to be completed between now and June. And we're anticipating, as Hank said, once the building gets enclosed, that the monthly requisitions, which have been averaging very low, will increase because the work will also increase and therefore the value will increase. Yesterday, the field report indicated 20 people on site. That's probably the most people we've had on site on the project in at least 6 to 8 months. So we're hopeful. I think this next 4 to 6 weeks is critical. We're monitoring that closely and getting this building weather tight so that we can proceed with all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the interior finishes. On the inside, we can't fully do that until it's deemed to be tight. And we're watching that for 2 reasons. One, on the construction schedule, but also we're watching that as it relates to surety and further conversations through town council on that to make sure that the building is getting weather tight and the contractor is living up to their current June 2019 completion date. Some of the other things that have contributed to the schedule delays, there have been quite a lot of turnovers in the general contractor. We've probably had 3 or 4 PMs, project managers, at least 4 or 5 site people on the job. We've terminated, or they've terminated 2 subcontractors for poor performance. That would be a concrete subcontractor and the site contractor. The inaccurate and incomplete schedule submissions I already referenced. The errors and omissions we've also referenced. There has been a lack of responsiveness by the general contractor and the design team to negotiate changes and share information in a timely manner so that the work could be done in the manner that it was supposed to. The submittals, the shop drawings, the requests for information are not really flowing the way they should on a regular project. And the OPM is trying to manage that, and that's part of the challenge as well. We, in fact, have been the folks managing all that. I already referenced the building committee's attendance at the owners' meetings. We're driving a lot of that ourselves. We see the voids, so much so that we, and it might be on a future slide, we as a subcommittee of the building committee have a call every Wednesday at 5 o'clock with the OPM to ask the right questions, challenge assumptions, find out what's going on with the design team, what's going on with the staffing, and we are really putting our best foot forward with regards to our level of effort. I have to commend the team quite a bit. I'm probably saying that too much, but I really think we're doing yeoman's work on that front. I already mentioned some of the shoddy work and lack of protection from the elements. That's led to rework and compounded delays. The site plan changes, including relocation of the generator and fire suppression tank. That's part of the site changes. It also contributed to schedule and cost increases. So what are we doing with all this? That's quite a lot of information I just shared. How are we going to get to the end of this job? We have to pull this team forward. It's our responsibility, the trustees and the library building committee, along with the select board, to bring this team across the finish line. We can talk about what the process is for surety, if someone has questions at the latter stages of this presentation, and town council can address that. So I did say that the town has formally notified the performance bond surety of contractor performance issues. We met with surety, town council, and the general contractor on 11/6. There were several people up here that were present for that meeting. Sean Colleen from the town was also in the meeting. We were promised at that time that things would pick up. They in fact have. We're cautiously optimistic, but we are going to be vigilant about watching the weather-tight activities over the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's really the bellwether on whether or not they're going to live up to their obligations in some ways. So I mentioned the sub-calls. We have weekly owner, architect, and construction meetings. The LBC meets with the trustees. The LBC meets every 2 weeks, and we also are meeting with the trustees on a regular basis. We're coordinating with Sean Colleen, C&D leadership, and the building inspector to solve roadblocks as they come up. We have ongoing consultation with town council. I probably talked to Tom, probably too much times, 3 to 5 times, 3 times a week. We're documenting all issues that are happening right now. We are, in fact, evaluating closely now the performance of every single one of the 3 parties that are responsible for delivering this project to the town. That's the OPM, the design team, and the general contractor. We've had ongoing meetings with town officials through 2018, which you heard a little bit earlier. On several occasions, January 2018, May of 2018, July, and August of this year, the LBC, library trustees, and the select board have met in executive session to discuss the project challenges, financial situation, and the town's legal position, and to agree on a course of action, some of which you're hearing tonight. One thing I want to say in wrapping up, I think this is my last slide, we're still extremely dedicated to delivering this project in the manner that the town would expect and the quality. We are not, we talk to Elizabeth regularly, getting this project done earlier and sacrificing quality is not a good combination. We want a quality project on a schedule that's realistic, and we're driving every day of the week to try to make that to happen. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Jim. So a lot of details there. I've got some more to go through, and then we'll get to your questions. So how are we going to pay for this? Chuck mentioned a few things. We've got $284,000 from the library capital funds within the endowment that were voted just a couple of weeks ago to help pay for it. We expect $70,000 plus or minus to be turned back to the town from the current fiscal year operating budget for the library. The library was scheduled to open during this fiscal year, and there were staffing additions included that will no longer happen, so there's money coming back. The project, believe it or not, was actually supposed to be finished in the last fiscal year, and so there was $50,000 that was turned back to the town last year that ended up in free cash. The town could decide to also put that towards the project, although it would require a vote, as it would for the $70,000. The Library Building Committee continues at each of their meetings to evaluate things that they can defer or delay to try to keep the cost under control. The library trustees are evaluating the ability of the operating funds of the library endowment to increase their annual distribution. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. It's been mentioned many times, we will pursue all negotiated and legal options to recover costs from folks who screwed up. But the bottom line is there is a projected cost increase of $2.2 million. I've just listed a number of ways that we're seeking to manage that, but it's clear that there will be incremental long-term borrowing over and above the $1 million that folks had talked about a few years ago. But we do believe that that number will remain below $3 million. And just as I know this seems to be a very touchy subject, to be crystal clear, I'm specifically talking about the long-term borrowing. The grant payment, final grant payment from the state will be delayed. We will not receive that until after the project is completed. There are a number of rebates that we are receiving from Eversource and a couple, at least one other source related to becoming LEED certified, which is a green initiative. Again, it will take a number of months post-project to validate the LEED certification, so it will take time for some of this money to come in, and obviously I can't guess at how long it might take to negotiate an agreement with the various contractors on our settlement with them. So moving on, another topic that's come up frequently is the library endowment. Thanks to many generous donors and good stewardship, the library currently has $2.55 million, subject to a little bit of market volatility. Roughly 60% of this money is in two operating funds that contribute to the library's annual budget. In the current fiscal year, it's $46,933. That's 9% of the library's budget. As I said, the trustees expect to maintain or increase this amount over time as those funds grow and as we are able to help support project costs. But that money is expressly not available for capital investment in the library. So the primary endowment within the operating funds are the Dowse Memorial Fund and the Salt and Stall Operating Fund. Since 1997, the Dowse Memorial Fund has distributed $97,520 to the town budget. The balance currently is about $93,000, reflecting strong stewardship over time. The trustees have been in control of the Dowse Fund since July 1992, when the town contributed $94,649 to the library trustees. It's the net proceeds from the sale of the building to Louis Randa of the Life Experience School. Half of this original amount is available for capital items, and so that will be contributed as part of the $284,000 that was just voted. That number is $47,324.50. Disbursement comes with a cost, as it will deplete this account by half. The annual distribution rate, which is currently $4,240, will be about 10%, which is unsustainable long term. Our modeling indicates that it should last for 15 to 20 years, over which time period we believe that the Salt and Stall Operating Fund, which is significantly larger, will grow enough to cover that distribution so that it doesn't impact the town budget. Speaking of which, since 1997, the Salt and Stall Operating Fund has distributed $418,485 to the town and has a current balance of $1.3 million. This fund was created at the end of 1984 with an initial $101,000 contribution. Subsequently, three $50,000 additions were made between 1994 and 1996. So the total base amount for that fund is $251,000. Again, over $400,000 distributions, and it's still worth $1.3 million, demonstrating the library trustees' good stewardship of these funds. Again, this fund is not available for capital expenditures, but we do believe that the annual distribution could be increased to help support the library budget and alleviate some costs for the town. The remainder of the endowment is held in a series of funds for children, building and landscape maintenance, and to provide some finishing touches, what we're calling, for the current project. The children's maintenance account and these other funds have distributed over $40,000 to the library during the past 6 years, costs that the town would have had to bear if not covered through the endowment. To date, there is $96,000 plus a little that's been donated to the town from the endowment, and I mentioned there's $284,000 and change that will be distributed shortly to help fund the project. So the total contribution from the endowment is $381,000, plus private donations that were raised at $3.7 million. Means that the total private funding sources is $4.05 million, a really significant number. So my last slide, thanks for bearing with us. The library trustees, as Chuck indicated, are committed to additional fundraising for the library endowment once the project is complete. Current challenges and project completion are our total focus, and the timing is poor in terms of additional donations. It will be significantly better to reach out to folks when they can feel and experience the new facility. From a technical perspective, a new campaign would require forming a new fundraising committee, just like we did for the capital campaign. There were also 2 private donations that were made that supported this fundraising activity, so that the costs were not borne by the campaign itself or by the town in any way. There are some remaining naming opportunities if anyone's interested, and we will use those to raise future funds as well. People have stepped forward already, even though there's no official campaign, raising $269,000 to cover project costs that actually are not permitted to be included in the project plan by the requirements of the state grant. So a significant portion of the exterior landscaping will need to be covered separately from the project once it's complete. We also benefit tremendously from a long and wonderful relationship with the Friends of the Library. They've been making donations since 1978 and have contributed over $300,000 to the library during this time, supporting significant efforts in terms of acquiring media as well as major portions of the library's programming every year. We look forward to continuing a strong partnership with them moving forward. So despite all the challenges and disappointment, you can see that the town's expected portion here, the maximum portion, is 28%. We are using estimates, as Jim indicated, but we believe those estimates are good. The Library Building Committee, the trustees, and many town officials have made an enormous commitment of time and effort to the project and deserve our thanks for all the effort. Without them, I think Jim's right, things would be significantly worse than they are. Thanks for your patience and attention. There's a lot of information we went through. I'm going to turn it back to George for the question and answer period.
Thank you, Hank and Jim, very much for that. Now, this is your opportunity to ask questions, and we hope that those of you who do have them will step forward. This is the time when we want to hear from you with any pertinent questions or comments you have regarding this presentation. I will allow each of you who would like to address questions to those on the stage. If you would like to do that, you'll note that there are 2 microphones, one down here and one to the rear of the auditorium. And I understand we may also have a portable microphone or 2 available. Yes, we do. So if that's your preference, that's fine too. When you do come to the microphone, if you would state your name and address. And I have my official timer down here. There she is. And what I'm going to do is allow those of you on an initial question or comment 3 minutes to offer that up. If there's a follow-up question or comment, I want to limit that to 1 minute. And I think that should be sufficient time for you to ask or say what you think is what's on your mind and address it to any of the appropriate people here on the stage. And I see somebody at one microphone now. So Skip, would you like to tell us who you are?
Stuart Smith, 29 Coolidge Street, Sherborn. If I understood correctly, when I walked in, we were told that we have approved $7.2 million to borrow to finish this library. So if my math's correct, the original ask was $1 million and it was $7.2 million, so that was $6 million that the library was going to create. Now we're being told we could spend up to 7.2. So 7.2 and 6 million to my book adds up to $13 million. You keep saying it's going to be 10.8, but your figures and everything that's happened has proved that your numbers don't work all the time, and you've run into lots of unexpected things. So I'm really asking, what is the total price of this whole thing? And you've given us a good estimate, and it is an estimate. And that's the first question. The second question is, what is this going to do to the tax rate? How much is this going to increase? We're at $19 a thousand in Sherborn now. We have one of the highest tax rate in the state. If my math is somewhat correct, if you add 3 million, you're basically going to add $3 a thousand to the tax rate. That roughly adds for an $800,000 house, $2,500 to every single house in town. And you're going to do this for 20 years. You're going to devalue every single house in town as far as I can figure out. So I would like to know what the tax rate's going to be to pay for this thing.
Anybody here available to take an attempt at that question? Why don't we ask, first of all, the question with regard to the finances. And Skip had asked about, listening to the numbers, seemed to think that the expenses... I'm sorry.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. What the numbers that he was referencing with the tax rate, if we were to borrow the additional 2.2 million that was mentioned earlier, and that was borrowed over 30 years long term, which hopefully it won't get to that 2.2 based on some of the recovery numbers and the library trustees raising more money. But if that maximum 2.2 million was borrowed, it would add to the average tax bill $113 per year. And the tax rate would be $19.76, it wouldn't increase taxes by $2,500 a year, not even close. Just based on long-term borrowing. And on the other part of it is the total estimates. I'm going to let the library bill committee answer that question.
Hello. The estimate right now is the 10.89 that we threw out there. That includes the $200,000 worth of project contingency. And as you said, Skip, that is an estimate, but we're trying to be conservative so we don't have to come back to the town with another number.
Another question?
Richard Robinson, 117 Mill Street. The Selectmen Advisory Board and those on next door Sherborn have heard my comments, but I'll summarize them. Anyway, I attended the town. Yeah. I attended the town meeting. Is this one working? Yeah. I attended the town meeting at which this vote was taken in 2015, and I voted for this project. At the time, we were told in no uncertain terms on the floor of town meeting by the project developer, by the person who was leading the project at that time, that the town contribution would be $1 million, and that all of the rest of the money of that $7.4 million would be paid for by the other sources. There wasn't anyone at that time, no one on the floor, no one on the stage, who stood up and contradicted that, who gave, in fact, the correct interpretation of the vote, which is that I, as a taxpayer, was going to be on the hook for my share of $7.4 million, not $1 million. My share of $1,000, there are about 1,000 households in town, my share was $1,000. That in fact my share would be, without any further decision on my part, without any further taking it to town meeting, that my share was in fact $7,400 and that I was voting for that. Nobody said that. I was not smart enough to stand up at that point and say, well, what happens if the project goes over? What happens if these things don't get fun? But neither was anybody else in a position of authority on that night willing to stand up and say, make sure you understand what you're voting on. Fool me once. I think the decision not to go back to town meeting, despite the fact that it's legal, is deeply, deeply wrong. We were promised, perhaps incorrectly, but we were promised that this was a $1 million project for the town. It's now turning out to be more than double that. The decision for the town to spend extra money on this should be brought to the townspeople. It should not be made based on what is, I'm sure, a perfectly legitimate legal opinion.
Any comment or response? Jim?
So I was here in 2015, and it was right when we came over and before we were coming back. That's how it felt then. That's how I feel now. That's how I questions. And trust me, you want to the time we came to the advisory committee last year, and we said, should you come on to April 2018 town meeting? And we said, no, let's wait to see what happens, because we don't really have a good firm guess on how much the money's going to be, and it's better if we know how much it's going to be. So we waited for more money. And then we said, okay, now we kind of know. We probably have to send out a notice to bond council to get this project completed. But now we'll get out to an end. And we asked that we get onto a special town meeting. And that's what we really wanted to do. And we were advised that, hey, maybe you're not going to have the votes. This is going to be against you if you go that way. It's too much of a risk. And from my point of view, I wanted to go for a vote. I still want to go for a vote. I think I'm on a minority view. But I want to tell you that it's been a very hard time not to do what we said we were going to do. Because we had a real benefit that we brought in 2015. I think we surprised ourselves, we surprised the town how well we had done. And we had done well because of all the townspeople. And they supported us so well and so generously. And I don't want to ever reach that trust. And library trustees don't want to ever reach that trust. The way we raised all this money all these years and spent all this money all these years is because you trusted us. And I don't think it's unfair for you to feel fooled, but we don't need to fool you. We need to tell you that this is where we find ourselves. Town council is advising us to do something different, and that's all I can say, Richard.
Any other questions people would like to pose? I see Dr. Microphone. Yes.
Good evening. Jennifer Bethel, 100 Nason Hill. Of the $2.2 million that the town is perhaps responsible for, what percentage or how much of it could be reasonably assessed, and I know this is speculative, as being able to be assessed as being part of the errors of the contractor and the architect? How much could we reasonably expect on the upside that the town could get back at some point?
That's a good question. We have to talk to the town council on that. Specifics. I will tell you that we have some estimates in mind. We have not approved out. Jeopardizing the town's legal position.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. That's exactly right. At this point, we believe that we have claims against the architect, OPM, and general contractor. They will likely have counterclaims against the town as well. The project obviously is not completed at this point, and as we continue to go forward, we continue to document any claims that we would have. However, it really wouldn't be prudent or appropriate at this point, nor are we really in a position to attach numbers to any of the parties' potential responsibility in this case, or to what the percentage of likely recovery would be in relation to this additional amount. It's really just too early to be able to make that type of a determination. And since it's pretty likely that we'll end up in some sort of claims resolution process, whether that be mediation, arbitration, or litigation, it really wouldn't be a great idea to start throwing out numbers at this point before we have any real sense of what they are and have proved them.
I will reiterate that we are trying to track those. We're not trying to be evasive, but you heard what Tom said. We're really trying to protect the town's recovery ability down the road.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, hi, Paul Bokikio, Hunting Lane. First, I'd like to thank everyone for holding this public forum to discuss this situation. Secondly, I'm not expressing an opinion on whether the town should contribute the $2 million or not. Thirdly, it's always a mistake to make comments after Richard and Jim have spoken, because they touched on what I wanted to talk about. But if you can indulge me for a couple of minutes, George. I haven't reviewed the warrant in the minutes of the 2015 town meeting, so I can't be definitive in my comments. However, like Richard, my general recollection was that the town voted in favor of contributing about $1 million to pay for the library, with the clear understanding that the remainder of the cost would come from the state and from private contributions. But according to town council, the warrant was either drafted craftily or wrongly to put the town on the hook for over $7 million if needed without an additional taxpayer input. That doesn't seem fair or right or actually make any sense to me. Without reviewing the relevant documents, I can't say I disagree or agree with town council's opinion about whether a new town vote is needed. Nevertheless, it seems extremely unfair to the taxpayers of this extremely taxed town to contribute an additional $2 million to the project without their consent. Given the tough situation the town faces in connection with the project, town residents may very well approve additional funding or they may not. But regardless of the legal opinion and the technical language of the warrant, given the amount of money involved, I suggest that the select board follow through its original direction to hold a special town meeting so the taxpayers can decide to contribute, whether to contribute additional funds or look for other private funding sources to complete this important project. The select board or the town officials should not avoid seeking approval from town residents by hiding behind a technical legal opinion, which I assume doesn't say the board cannot ask for an additional town meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one down here I'd like to take first. Next.
Hi, I'm Joe Carchidi, 33 Woodland Street. What I haven't heard discussed is the high leverage impact of the schedule itself. It seems to me from listening carefully that the schedule has more leverage than almost anything else. That is, the more it slips, the more the costs go up and up and up, and up goes the risk of losing the state funding and so forth. So what I'm wondering is, we've suffered incrementally with these slippages, followed by more slippages, and yet nothing has been said about dumping the contractors in charge. I don't know enough about this sort of thing to know whether that's the general contractor or who it is, but I wonder if it's if there's been any look at bringing in some hero company that would pull this out, give an aggressive schedule, and get it done, so that the risk goes down of losing the state funding and all that. So it seems too incremental from my point of view, but again, I'm not a construction person. Thank you.
So I'll take a stab at that first, and then Tom, you can weigh in. You're absolutely right with regards to the impact on the schedule. This particular project, and we haven't gotten into the detail on this yet, it might be a good time to get into some of the cease and desist situation. First of all, the contractor replacement would take approximately 3 to 4 months. The contractor would have to be in default for us to terminate, or they would have to have, to use a term that was on one of the slides, shoddy workmanship, and they certainly have had a series of challenges. However, complicating the matter on this, and Tom can speak to it shortly, is there was a cease and desist order issued by the DEP as it relates to the public water supply, which is adjacent to the town hall. Now, this project had to go through all the normal approvals a project would have to go through. On that front, there were some challenges with regards to the design being done incorrectly, and the design team, quite frankly, understanding that they were given authorization to proceed with the design, which upon further review by the DEP was rejected. The DEP also issued a cease and desist because there were some contaminants in the water system below grade, and the cease and desist was meant to apply to a 100-foot zone adjacent to the town hall. It in fact did not truly impact the construction of the structure, the library structure itself. However, the contractor took that as a way to give an excuse as to why he was not proceeding with the structure. We had multiple conversations with the contractor on that front, and his determination, as well as legal counsel and surety, was that they could not be in default on schedule because, in fact, the cease and desist order was in place, and until that was lifted, they could not give a determination on when the final schedule could be completed. That lasted from approximately July of last year, end of July of last year, until this August, I think it was, Tom, when the cease and desist was lifted. It was only at that point that the contractor could give a formal schedule completion date, albeit it has slipped since they gave that after that date. And so it was a fairly complicated matter to terminate the contractor, one, for that reason, and two, how long it would take to get a new contractor on board, even if we were to terminate today, and we'd have to go through surety and Tom can get into that. It would take a minimum of 3 to 4 months to bring someone in. It's a very busy market. I'm not making excuses for the contractor by any means. The subs are very busy to get someone to pay attention that's not even under contract yet. To come in here and give an aggressive schedule that wants to do this job would also be a challenge. So we talked about this a lot. There are many of us that wanted to terminate the contractor a lot earlier, but I just gave you some background on some of the complicating matters that were related to doing that.
Thank you, Jim. So in addition to what Jim just indicated, it's Massachusetts public construction, so it's not atypical, frankly, for projects to end up in these types of situations. The process by which the town would be required to follow in the event of a termination, in this case would be with respect to the general contractor, as Jim indicated, is performance bond claim. We have started that process as indicated in the earlier slide presentation, and it has generated some success. There has certainly been some improvement in terms of the level of activity and progress towards completing the project since our meeting with the surety in the beginning of November. If we were to terminate the contractor, we would again go through the surety with respect to a performance bond claim, and it would be at least a 3 to 4 month delay before a new contractor would be on site. With respect to the other members of the project team, the OPM and the architect, it is also a difficult process with respect to potential termination, and there's consequences, both good and bad, that result from any type of decision of that magnitude. With respect to the OPM, by law, the town's required to have an owner's project manager on any project that exceeds $1.5 million, which this project obviously does. It is also a condition of the grant that was received from the NBLC. So in order to, if the town were to take that step to terminate the OPM, we would have to have another one in place really in order to do that. And that obviously requires a bidding process under Massachusetts law as well. So, and same with respect to the architect, same thing, is subject to the designer selection law, which requires a bidding process in order to retain a new architect. It's also very difficult to get an architect to essentially come in and sign on to a design that had been prepared by someone else for liability reasons. So these, as Jim indicated, are all issues that have been discussed without getting into any of the details, but they're issues that we have discussed at length in executive session with the board and Board of Library, the Library Building Committee, as well as members of the Board of Trustees. So it's, unfortunately, it's not a simple process like it would be in private construction. When it involves public construction, it is a much more difficult and process-oriented process in order to terminate, and there are obviously conditions, adverse conditions that can result from that, most notably further delay with respect to the project. Thank you.
One nuance I just might add to the OPM, the town does have the ability to have an employee of the town serve as the OPM. We would have to actually seek and find somebody, probably have to advertise for that position and go through that process. That's the other option that the town has with regards to replacing the OPM.
Can I add one thing to that? I just want to point out, just on, when the cease and desist was lifted in early August, we immediately called a meeting. We met with the select board. We invited the architect and the contractor to come and talk to us about how they were going to get the project done. And you know, it was sort of as follow-up after that meeting, when commitments weren't made, that we connected with town council about notifying the surety. So we really have been trying to stay on top of this as much as we can from a timing point. But you're absolutely right, every month that goes on is more expensive because of the soft costs.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening. I'm Dan Sickle. I live at 116 Lake Street. So let me start out just by thanking all of you for your efforts in seeing this through. I know this is a tough time, and I'm sure it hasn't always been fun, and it's certainly been a lot of work. I'm a big supporter of the library project. Like many here, I donated to Friends of Library for the project and the building committee to try to see this through. All that said, a couple of questions. First set of questions. Heard from town council and from Chair Yan that with public construction, it's just always kind of a mess and things go wrong. That's a little bit frustrating. If that's the case, then maybe in 2015 we should have started out with a lot of stuff's going to go wrong. We need to build in a very large contingency because things always go wrong with public construction. So I wonder if maybe somebody from the library committee and somebody from select board could maybe tonight offer a few thoughts on lessons learned. So looking forward, what would we want to do different on the next big project that the town takes on, so that perhaps we don't find ourselves in this situation again? And perhaps that's something that would be worth some deeper reflection on. I'm sure many of you have thought hard about that, but I think I and probably others would be interested in hearing some of those thoughts of how we could, what are the lessons that we've learned so that we could do better next time. Second set of questions about the town council's opinion on the 2015 vote and what borrowing authority is. So I want to second what others said, that it seems to me that we should have had a town meeting for the town to authorize the additional spending, whether that's the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. That's certainly the spirit of what I think people in 2015 intended. And if there was such a vote, I would certainly vote for it unhappily, but I would vote to support it. But I do wonder if town council could comment on whether we should think about the 2015 vote as the town really was authorizing $7.5 million of borrowing and expenditure, and if there are further cost overruns, that the town can continue to borrow until that $7.4 million has been exhausted. And that's really what the town understood at the time. Or, as was suggested earlier, did the town misunderstand what they were voting on, and perhaps sloppy drafting leaves a loophole open through which an additional $6.4 million of borrowing can occur. It's possible that that's the correct legal judgment, but I think in terms of the spirit of what people voted for then, I would have liked to see this come to a town meeting for a vote. And I would have Thank you.
You want me to answer the first part?
Go.
What's that? Is that a question posed to us, or we can offer some? Okay. Who's going to comment?
The first question is a terrific question. It's an important question. It's hard for towns like Sherborn, given our size, to do it. But one of the things I think we've got to review is whether or not we need to have a standing building committee that has additional costs for the town, because these projects are episodic. But given the history and the difficulty in public construction, I think it's a great point. It's one of the things that I want to discuss with those select board. Larger towns, Natick and Framingham, in my opinion, do a better job. They have the ability to fund it. And if we can't, another alternative is trying to hire in some expertise to deal with it. But there's so much money at stake that I think it's an important issue. I know that Jim and Mary, we've chatted about this, so Jim, do you want to jump in as well?
I would say that's an excellent point. Sherborn is set up quite a bit differently than a lot of the municipalities that I've worked with. There is not one standing committee who actually is the authority to make the ultimate decision on behalf of the town on this particular job, because it's the trustees, the select board, David Williams and his crew. There's a lot going on there, and trying to manage that and get to a decision in a timely manner is tough. I would say, to your point of all public construction is crazy, I would say this is crazier than most. I've done on many public construction jobs that have been good, even ones that come in under budget and actually on schedule. So one of the things I've learned in overseeing those kind of jobs are two things, and I could talk for a long time on this, but I won't. One is having the right amount of contingency, which you hinted at, for this kind of job. What is the risk profile of the job? Is the schedule realistic? What can we afford? What we can afford is not always the right amount. So, and then we're back to the town asking for more money in some regards on that front. The second thing is, and this is a long conversation, is there are two delivery methods used in public construction, 149 and 149A, Chapter 149 and Chapter 149A. Chapter 149 is what we're using. It's a lump sum bid. You have limited capacity to pre-qualify the general contractor or to bar somebody from bidding on a job if you go 149. That's great for new construction. This one was kind of a tweener. So I could go with 149 on this. If we had a better contractor, I think it would have worked out a little differently in the design team as well. 149A is much more of a partnership. You bring the CM on board, CM at risk. You'll have a different quality of contractors that would participate in that. That it's much more of a partnership. They join the team early on in the design. They help with value engineering, which is reviewing the documents and making sure things are coordinated. They provide the estimate, they provide the schedule. By the time construction starts, they own a lot of the decisions, or with the town and the design team, a lot of the decisions that have been made, they were part of. So their ability to hit change orders on schedule, quality, existing conditions go down rapidly, and the risk profile on the job should probably go down from the start. So, sorry, that was a long dissertation.
One less, I think.
Not used the 149A.
This was, I
mean, that seems to be clear.
I don't think many of us,
better choice, right?
I don't think many of us thought that this job was that complicated to begin with. There were some existing conditions which we talked about. There were some changes, but we talked about it, and you know, there's part of the building that's new, which should be pretty straightforward. The trick there is joining it to the existing, which has some challenges. The existing modifications, in our collective opinion, weren't challenging enough to warrant a change in delivery method. And quite frankly, the OPM, we brought it up. We didn't hear that from the OPM. It's really his responsibility to put that to the floor for discussion.
One thing I'd add, can you hear me? In terms of lessons learned, I will say that the addition of the CMD and facilities director, John Flynn, in his role and sort of overseeing the campus has been tremendously helpful. And that was not something that was in place when the project started. So I do want to thank Sean for his commitment and time. He's really put a lot into the project. And, you know, my lesson learned there is that, you know, we should have had this 3 years ago.
I'm Tom McEnany from KP Law. To address the second question, which concerned my legal opinion with respect to the prior town meeting vote and you know, what may or may not have been intended by voters when they voted on it. And my opinion is based upon the article and the motion, and that's really all that I can base it on. Town meeting has, you know, I don't know how many people were at that particular town meeting, but it's hard to determine what each individual intended when they voted. Certainly, there were comments made, and there are obviously opportunities to make amendments to any motion that's on the floor, but that wasn't done, and so we're left with what town meeting voted, which was, again, approved unanimously to borrow the amount of $7,479,436 with three contingencies which have all been satisfied. With respect to borrowing articles, those are typically drafted by bond counsel, not by me as town council, and nor was I involved with the town in 2015. But so ultimately, you know, if the town had intended something different, and certainly it either could have been drafted differently or somebody could have made an amendment, but that did not happen, and as a result, my opinion is based upon what was voted by town meeting. And as I indicated, the town has independently sought an opinion from bond counsel, and he came to the exact same conclusion that I did as well. So.
Thank you. One more question. Could the town continue borrowing to the full 7.4 million, so another 6.4 million, without coming back to the town for town meetings?
Yes, what was authorized by town meeting is a borrowing in the amount of $7,479,436.
And so for further cost overruns, the borrowing can continue until that amount is exhausted.
That's correct. That's what was approved, exactly. And there was also, in addition to the town meeting vote, which was again approved unanimously, there was also a debt exclusion vote that was approved at the ballot box to authorize that.
All right, next please.
Yes, John Harrison, 33 Hunting Lane. I have a two-part question about the numbers. The first part is, per the latest building committee minutes that are available for November, the estimated percentage of completion is 55%. Can anybody tell me how much money has actually been expended to date? And then the second part of the question is, I understood from the comments earlier that the 3.6 million grant from the state is not actually funded till completion. So where's that money coming from? Would that be an additional short-term borrowing?
I can handle the second question. So The state grant is paid out in 5 installments. We've actually received 4 of those installments already. One of those installments was actually received before construction commenced. That money was in the bank earning interest, and so there's almost $8,000 worth of interest that's also been contributed to the funding of the project from that. So we've received 4 of those 5 payments. The final payment won't be received, as I said earlier, until the end. So if you take the 3.6 and divide it by 5, that's we're 800,000 or so. You know, it's what we're waiting to receive, but the rest has already been received. And all of the funds from the campaign have been paid into the town as well. So we do have the additional $284,000 that we will contribute near term, but all of the private money, every donation came in, which is a wonderful result.
I can answer the first part of the question. The paid to date, this is according to the finance director as of December 3rd, 2018, paid to date $4,666,272.46. And just to kind of also highlight what Hank said, so far, those monies that have been spent have all come from either the private donations or the grants that have already been received. So none of the town's money has been tapped yet for the prior payments.
Thank you. And then just quickly, my comment is, while on the one hand, I appreciate the comments about maintaining quality and shortchanging the project, I frankly am disappointed that there were no comments tonight about any efforts to save money, whether through revisiting the design or any other efforts in that direction.
Yeah, I might not have explained it fully during my brief presentation. So we did go through what the industry typically calls value engineering, looking at furniture, finishes, fixtures, materials, and program to try to get the budget where it should be for a building of this nature. If your question is more oriented towards, once we saw we were going down a certain path, why didn't we do anything, which is probably the nature of your question. We did look at that. At that point, though, there was really not much that we could really do on a redesign that would actually save money and have the same program. There are certain programmatic requirements that we need to abide by that are imposed by the NBLC for the grant. So the program is one thing, and then they even look at finishes and some other things. So we did look at it. We did look at deferring purchasing of certain items, whether that was FF&E or IT, but that's what we ended up.
If I could, when I answered your question before, the amount that I gave you, the $4,666,000, was what we had paid to 5-Star. Altogether, we've paid out $6,097,581.20. My apologies for that.
And just to clarify one thing, the town has, and the project has received the $1,190,000 as a receipt. Sharon McPherson, the finance director, is on vacation, and I'm looking at that same spreadsheet, that there's the $1 million was initially approved, and then the $190,000 for the roof have been received.
We're not spent.
One thing I do want to clarify on the costs and soft costs, our estimate based on requests by the OPM and the design team, which is a lot of that, and we have not agreed on any value. We're carrying that as an upset limit. We don't anticipate that we're going to end up meeting their requests for additional services for the reasons we've been talking about since we got into this room.
I will say that the furnishings and some of the finishing touches or the things that go in after the building's completed, we looked to see if there were any contracts that were still flexible that we could look at and defer. The LDC just last Monday decided to look at the carpeting in the children's room to decide if that made sense to go with the choice that they had made a year and a half ago. There's still some opportunity potentially to reduce the cost on that, but that the LDC will meet again and talk about that. So it's small, it's not a lot of money, but it's, we're looking at every possible option there.
All right. Michael?
Michael Lee, 28 Wildwood Drive. First off, I would like to thank all the work of the Library Building Committee. I was once a volunteer on a similar magnitude project with my church where we had a meltdown between the contractor and the architects and engineers, and it's not pleasant, so I feel your pain. That said, I understand the financial logic and imperative to go out and borrow this additional money to complete the project and then pursue litigation. I understand the legal authority that we inadvertently provided the town to procure those funds. I don't think we have the moral authority to take that additional borrowing and add it to the tax rate in the context of an excluded debt offering. I do believe that it's possible for this town to take that additional borrowing and service the debt within the limits of Prop 2.5 in our operating budget. And I urge that the Board of Selectmen work with advisory and have a special town meeting before our normal April town meeting to sort that out with the community and to once again restore agency to our town meeting process, to our legislative body, and get us back into the decision making. We do not have to go out and raise more taxes. We can look at our budget and make a decision about how to accommodate in the context of our existing $25 million budget to service this debt. And it's going to require pain, and will be pain incurred by organizations and departments across the board, but I think that's how most organizations respond to whoopses, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit corporation. There's no general unilateral opportunity to just yank more funds out of thin air. And that's what I hope that advisory and selectmen would take this under consideration and bring the town back into this decision process. Obviously, the project needs to get forward. We have to finish it. There's too much financial risk not to, but there are options.
Thank you. Yes?
Carol Marple, Stony Brook Road. As the person who certifies borrowing authorizations for the town, we definitely at annual town meeting 2015 did vote 7.4 and change for the library project. It is my opinion that at that meeting, statements by the then chair of the library trustees to the effect that they would only use $1 million of that borrowing authorization. I think those statements were responsible for the town's approval of that warrant article. And we definitely are on the legal hook for that amount of money should we need it for this project. And we need to find a way for this project to go forward. But I do believe that we are losing the trust of the town by not involving the town in this decision-making process in some legal fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah?
Christine Cooney, 55 Maple Street. I just have a question about the possibility of recovering some of the losses through either litigation or some kind of claims process. And I was just wondering whether the contracts with the Five Star and with the design team and so forth do or don't contain clauses for binding arbitration as the sole remedy for claims resolution, dispute resolution. Usually, I mean, just I think a lot of contracts of that nature do have that, and it's the sole remedy.
Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm asking whether in the contract between the town and the general contractor and the design team and so forth, and all those contracts, whether binding arbitration, which would negate having to go to court or having the opportunity to go to court, whether those terms are in the contract.
I don't recall off the top of my head whether or not they have those provisions in them. As I had indicated earlier, it's highly likely that at the end of this project, we will end up in some sort of a claims resolution process, and that could be either mediation, arbitration, or litigation. We'd have to look to see specifically whether the contract requires arbitration. Typically, in contracts that do require arbitration, there is often a requirement that as part of that process, you attend non-binding mediation before you end up in the formal arbitration process. But arbitration would essentially be quite similar to a litigation process anyways, so as far as the type of effort that has to be expended, as well as any expert witnesses, non-witnesses, and things of that nature.
A little speedier, though. a little speedier a lot of times, I think, arbitration.
Possible, but not always the case. It really is a variable that is hard to predict in terms of the timing. Sometimes the process does not take as quickly as you'd like it to, whether that's either in arbitration or litigation, but generally speaking, it certainly is possible.
Thank you.
Mark Castellini, 39 Maple Street. It's on the same kind of subject. Any monies that might be recovered through any kind of legal or negotiated settlement, is there any legal requirement that those funds would go against the additional borrowing by the town, or would other people have claims to that?
I think we're having a little difficulty understanding your question specifically.
Okay, if you pursue damages against the contractor and you recover funds from the project funds from any kind of legal or negotiated settlement within the slide, would those funds be used to repay any additional borrowing by the town of Sherborn, or would other parties of the project have any claim on those funds?
When you say other parties, are you referring to like the architect or the OPM?
Yeah, or the state, or could somebody say, well, instead I want to buy more furniture with it, or I want to do this with it?
Well,
if you recover funds, is it going to go against the additional debt incurred by the town?
I believe that would be the intent, certainly, is that any recovery that the town makes with respect to any claims against either the general contractor, OPM, and/or architect would all be for the purposes of funding the additional costs associated with the project.
Okay, but there's no, it might be the intent, but there's no assurance that we have as taxpayers that that's where the money will go.
Hello? I think it's safe to say that this board will certainly, if we raise any subjectification to it, will vote to put any recovery toward that $2.2 million.
I think the money goes back into the general fund, and the town has to spend it.
Yeah, I think that would be a decision of the select board and the advisory committee.
Decision of the town meeting when they vote the budget.
Yeah, they may require town meeting the budget.
It just that it was a little unsure, the additional
well, but I think you raise a really good point, which is that these details need to be nailed down before we actually do any borrowing. We haven't done any borrowing beyond that 1.2 million. And we do have commitments today from the library trustees, but I would certainly want to see those reduced to some type of agreement that was enforceable in terms of amounts and timing and contractual obligations to put forward all the funds that they've said they're willing to make available and to sharpen their pencils. And that's something we've been pushing for a while with this. I also wanted to say something because Tom has given you a legal answer, and we heard the same legal answer. We scheduled a town meeting. We took our council's advice on balance. The board thought that that was a better thing for the town. It reduced risk and exposure to the town. It would save the town money
ultimately in the long run. But you're not wrong. People, Rich Robinson and others, as a matter of politics, or Michael said ethics, you're not wrong. That's a decision that the town has a right to make. The thought that Tom says we can do it, that really is a legal answer, and that's all it is.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul, Kiki, Hunting Lane. Well, as mentioned, some of us don't think it's dispositive of what the legal opinion says, but regarding the moral obligation to hold the town meeting. But I wanted to ask a question about the legal opinion, since I like legal opinions. There was a lot of statements that there were comments and answers at the annual town meeting about the intent of the warrant, and I'm not sure what's in the minutes, but I would think town council, if there's something in the minutes, should take that into consideration in the opinion about whether it's the town voted for 1 million or 7.6 million. And I'm not sure, what's in the minutes, but I wanted to ask town council, what he thought about that, because even if the language is clear and there were some representations, that can change the opinion because of equity. And also, whether the town, whether the opinion can be made public, so some of us that are interested can take a look at it.
With respect to the opinion, again, it's based on what is clear language of the motion. The motion, which was approved unanimously, specifically authorized the borrowing in the amount of $7,479,436, as long as 3 contingencies had been satisfied, and they all have been. That was that the town would receive a grant from the MBLC. The library would deliver at least $2,845,833 in private donations, and that a debt exclusion vote would be approved. And all of those 3 things happened. When the language of the motion is clear, it's not as if, it's not a situation where you're looking at legislative intent or something like that, like you would perhaps with respect to a statute. But here there's really no ambiguity whatsoever in the vote and the motion. And again, this was, my opinion, was independently verified by the town with bond counsel, who came to the same exact conclusion. So I don't really know what else to say without continuing to be repetitive, that the motion that was approved authorized the borrowing for that amount. And I don't know what each individual member who attended, the voter in town who attended that town meeting may have thought with respect to what they were voting on, but that is ultimately what the final vote was.
Yeah, are there any statements in the minutes regarding comments, or they're just cut and dry warrants and votes, and that's it?
Typically, that's what's included. But again, I don't know that it makes a difference, because their vote here is not ambiguous in any manner. It's very clear what exactly was voted by town meeting unanimously at that time.
I think Carol would like to answer that question.
The minutes reflect merely the motion and the vote. You have to go to the tape of the town meeting to hear the remarks by the trustees and other proponents that they were only the town would only be borrowing $1 million for the project. It was not part of the motion. So town council is perfectly correct when he says we authorized $7.4 million.
Thank you. Frank, I'm going to let you, Mike, if you just wait. Do you have another question?
Yeah, just one last question for town council. Does the opinion say that a special meeting is not necessary, and it doesn't say that you can't have a special meeting?
My opinion is that it's a town meeting vote to appropriate or borrow any additional monies for the library project is not required because town meeting has already authorized the borrowing in the amount of $7,479,436. So that was the question that I was asked to answer, which was, is it necessary to seek additional approval from town meeting? The answer is no. The board, the select board, as well as the library trustees and library building committee all talked about the need for transparency with the voters in town. And in order to achieve that goal, my recommendation was to, instead of holding a special town meeting, since authorization for further borrowing is not being sought, nor is it required to be sought, was to schedule this public forum for the purposes of addressing any questions, concerns, or other comments that you have with respect to the library project, and to hear from the select board, the trustees, and the library building committee on the status of the project and what the future looks like as far as scheduling and the expected additional costs associated with the library project. So that was my opinion.
Great, thanks.
So I wasn't involved in the language of the motion. I'm sorry. I wasn't involved in the language of the motion back in 2015, but my understanding, and anybody who was can correct me up here, is that because the MDLC grants were coming in 5 increments, there was a need to borrow in advance of those grants. And so the language of the motion needed to allow us to have the money available to pay for the project in anticipation of those grants. In hindsight, I was involved in the PowerPoint slides that were created for that presentation. And I think to the gentleman who brought up the lessons learned, I don't think there was coordination, as much coordination as there could have been on that. And I think we absolutely intended to ask to be $1 million. It was still the $1 million of that 7.4, and now that the project has gone higher, we are where we are today. So, more on the retrospective and lessons learned there.
All right, Michael?
A brief follow-up. I guess I would request that the individual Board of Selectmen go on record tonight, whether it's their intent to pursue any additional borrowings to be financed via the debt exclusion, or whether you will pursue alternative ways to identify how we can fund the debt service costs within the scope of our current annual operating funds. So I don't know if there's a way to request that as a vote, or each of you to individually provide comment on what you feel should happen.
Well, I'll let the other members of the board speak as well. This has been a long and ongoing process, and given where we are and the importance of getting the building weather tight is one of the things that was critical to me. The decision to cancel the special town meeting was a difficult one, and I can only speak for myself, but it's based on where the project is, additional commitments from the library trustees. So I view this very much as a decision based on where we were at the time, but I would ask the other members of the board to address it as well.
Do you understand the distinction?
Let's
just because we borrow does not mean everything we borrow has to be paid for as a debt exclusion of export tax service. That's the distinction here. Many towns.
Michael, we have to follow a procedure here to make sense of all of this. So I would ask, I guess,
Michael, from my standpoint, I would answer that in the context of the budget as a whole. I'm not going to blow the town's budget up on principle. 100 and whatever it is bucks on the average house a year is a lot of money, and if there's ways to adjust the budget so that doesn't become the burden, if there's ways to get money back from the library trusts and other potential sources of income, that'd be a good thing, but you can't answer a question like that in the abstract.
Michael, I also just would like to add, the 2.2 is not immediately going to be bonded long-term. My point is the 2.2 is the maximum. We hope to recover a lot of that through the library trustees, through potential litigation. In the meantime, we have to spend the money, and we have the authorization to borrow that money short-term so we can get the project done. Yes, we can look at the budget as the advisory starts looking at it this spring, but I agree with Michael, you can't just blow up the budget when we don't even know what the final number is going to be that is going to be paid for by the taxpayers.
And one thing, to your follow-on point, Michael, the $190,000 that was authorized for the roof repairs was done by a reserve fund transfer, not a 2.5 exclusion. So obviously we work with both advisory. Your point's well taken. Doesn't necessarily have to be a debt exclusion. And a borrowing. A lot is going to depend on the timing and what's available and what advisory committee is willing to do in terms of reserve fund transfers. So.
Any other comment? No. Charlie.
Charlie Williams, 10 Abbey Road. I suspect that we're all aware that there's a great deal of controversy and concern about the ruling. I'd like to change the focus, if I may, toward what are we going to do from this point on. Let's look to the future. I believe it's true that Sherborn has totally been behind this project from the very beginning. Everybody here has done the best they could to manage this project. We're in it. There's only one way out, that's through. We have $6 million, if I understood Jim correctly, in sunk costs. If we abide by the town council's ruling, we can borrow up to $7 million more dollars. Up to $7 million. We agreed to borrow 1, maybe legally we agreed to borrow 7. My concern is this. Our group here received from the general contractor on the 29th of November a project plan which has this project completed June 2019, 7 months from now. I've not heard a single word from anyone as to whether they believe that that's going to happen. I haven't heard any proposal about that. We have a general contractor who, by testimony tonight, has not met a single milestone, has not been cooperative. I have not heard anything tonight as to whether the now projected schedule, and we have testimony that every scheduled delay raises costs, and it's represented that our new borrowing on the projection tonight, if I got the figures right, is like maximum of 3.2 million. That is, if the project is completed by June. But town council tells us that we're on the hook for $7 million.
Charlie,
yes.
Unfortunately, time is up, I'm afraid.
Yep.
If you want to follow up in a moment.
I would like an estimate from somebody as to what we are actually expecting to do to bring this project in 2019 in June, or some percentage estimate.
Thank you,
Mark, do you mind talking a little bit about getting the building weather tight and where we are with that?
Well, within the past few weeks, after a long period,
You have to speak into the microphone.
can you hear me? Okay. After a long period of inactivity, the contractors finally gotten, 5 Stars finally gotten the roofer and other exterior building envelope contractors, subcontractors on site. There's been significant progress on the roof and some other exterior envelopes, skylights and other components. So, that's a positive sign. I think if they can keep up that pace, there is a good chance that they can meet the June deadline. But we've only recently received the schedule, and it takes a long time to analyze the logic of it to see whether it's really needable or not. But we have included another $200,000 contingency on top of what we expect the project budget to be at this time. So that gives us a little bit of room for completion somewhat later than June.
And the one thing I would just add is repeating what Jim said, that since we called the performance bond, I think who knows how long it's going to last, but there has been an uptick. I was at the police station on Friday, and there were 10 to 12 people on site. No guarantees that the performance has not been up to snuff, but since we called the performance bond, that has been hopefully that's happened. So far, it appears to be having a significant increase in the amount of resources.
Richard, Frank, you've been standing there for a bit. Okay, Tom.
I'd like to look back just for a second.
Who are you?
Instead of forward.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Tom Ermston, 79 Hollow Street. I understand that under state law that as a public project, we have to accept the lowest bid unless there are extraordinary circumstances, i.e. unless there are reports that the contractor has woefully underperformed on some other project. So I would be interested in knowing, was there any consideration on the building committee to consider an alternative contractor, albeit having to go through a few more hoops, specifying why you didn't accept the lowest bidder? And I would also be interested in knowing whether what the next lowest bid was in the array of bidders who stepped forward and responded to the town's project.
I'll answer the first part of that question. So typically the OPM, and we did do it on this project, is required to validate that the contractor at the lowest responsible bid is qualified to do the job through reference checking as well as his DCAM, which is his public scoring system that's been put in place by the state of Massachusetts down at the State House. He did look at that. They did qualify on the merits of their score as well as references that were checked. With regards to, and we discussed it at some length, with regards to the next lowest bidder, I actually don't recall what that number was. I don't know if anyone on the committee
I
does.
can look it up and we can publish it on the website later. I don't have it in front of me, but I recall it was upwards of $500,000 delta. So I remember at the time we were happy that the bid had come in within the revised budget estimate that we had.
Frank?
Good evening. My name is Frank Cook, Town Line Road. This evening was supposed to be an evening, and I know that everybody's sitting up there, especially those on the right side, to Mr. Fisk, be having some cocktails and cheese and crackers and enjoying the opening of the library this evening. That is everybody's goal up there, and that's what you worked very hard for. We understand that. And I know that you also enjoy being in the Sherborn Community Center again, the townhouse, after a long vacancy of not being there. But with that said, I do have a question, and that is, we still have the same contractor, the same OPM, the same, seems to me, specifications, criteria, outcome in mind. We haven't made any really great progress to date, and where we have some overruns. I'd like to hear maybe a little bit more of what Charlie's asking as well. What are we going to do from today forward to June, whenever that final date is, to make sure that happens, and to try to make sure that we don't go above the numbers that we have heard this evening? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start, and I will echo what Chuck has said, and that is there has been a lot of activity, and Mark referenced it as well, over the last 3 or so weeks since we had a meeting with Surety and the contractor. I would say that, and Mark, you can chime in, Mark actually attends almost every owner's project meeting on a weekly basis to help protect the town's interests and help drive the process to date. But we do have to get into the schedule. We do have to validate and verify the logic in the schedule. Richard Littlefield, who's in the audience, is also part of the LBC. Richard has a unique skill set to dive into those kinds of things, and he's in the middle of validating whether or not the logic and the durations and how things tie out in the current schedule as developed and presented to us is valid. Once we get that results of Richard's review and multiple conversations, we'll go back to the contractor with all of our questions, as we have done on a regular basis. There is no guarantee to get to the point that the contractor is going to finish in June of 19. We just have to almost manage it. What we will do is almost do micro schedules for each element of the building that needs to be finished. So you have the exterior, you have the interior, you have the finishes, and so forth. And each one of those needs to be managed at a highly finite level of detail. And Richard's actually excellent at looking at that, as well as Mark. And we'll continue to do that. And that's my reply to the question. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mark.
No. All right, Skip.
Stuart Smith, 29 Coolidge Street. I have a follow-up question to legal counsel. You've stated a couple of times in this $7,400,000 that we voted for the whole thing, but you also just said there's 3 contingencies to it. One is the debt override, but also the fact that the money, the $3.5 million in state grant money and the 2 point whatever it was from the library trustees is included in that figure. All right, so the whole figure is it's not 7.4 plus the 3.5 plus the 2.8 from the library trustees. It's 7.4 plus the 3. Minus the 3.5 minus the 2 point whatever. That I'm saying you legally don't have the right to borrow any more money than the 7.4, including those 2 other numbers.
In my opinion, you're incorrect. The full authorization for the borrowing was $7,479,436. That full amount could be borrowed provided the 3 contingencies were met. All 3 contingencies were met. It does not provide that the amount would be reduced by the amount received from any grant or by any donations that were received. That is not what was voted. What was voted was in a borrowing in the full amount of the $7,479,436, and that full amount could be borrowed provided that those 3 contingencies were satisfied, and they were.
But 3 contingencies should offset that.
It doesn't say that in the motion or in the article. That's not what was voted.
Sue?
Hi, good evening. Susan Tyler, Western Avenue. 2 things that I've noticed tonight, and basically they're questions. Earlier, Mr. Murphy on the library trustee board there had said that there was a possibility of coming before the town meeting back in April of 2018, but they weren't sure ready at that point for how much money they needed. My suggestion for all the people that seem to be very upset that they don't have a voice in this, and they don't understand it because we were told at that town meeting in 2015 we were only borrowing $1 million. I would like to see the library trustee, the building committee, submit an article, not an article, a report at the spring town meeting, so that they are there is a report, an update for everybody, and the audience, the full town can be involved in that. They don't need to be there asking for money, please, no more borrowing. My other comment is, who's paying all these legal fees? The library trustees? Are you going to get it back from the contractors, or is that also something we're on the hook for above and beyond the $7.4 million? Thank you.
I'll mention that we did, in the 2.2 estimate, include some assumptions for legal fees. If we finish on time tonight, that would be good. But, I mean, not trying to be funny, but we did make some assumptions around legal costs that are associated with this additional, problem that we're dealing with right now.
I'll assume that you've already gone over that.
Yes.
Kristen Queen, 55 Maple Street. I'm just curious, it seems like the only thing that's gotten the contractor moving is to get the surety involved. And are you making specific claims to them now? Is it, at what point can you put pressure on, well, you are already doing that, but at what point can the surety, or might the surety offer money for delays and for other costs that are the responsibility of the contractor?
You could probably step up to that, but the town would actually have to call the bond and terminate the contractor, and then the surety would either finish the job or force Five Star to finish the job or finish it with another contractor.
Okay, so basically you can't do it, you can only hash it out at the end. You have to either...
No, that would be...
No?
Go ahead.
Right, so it's a two-step process to make a performance bond claim under the form of bond that was used for this project. The first step is the one that we have already taken, which is to notify the contractor and the surety essentially of the issues with respect to the project and an intent to potentially declare a contractor default. That's been done. The surety met with us as well as the general contractor out at the site at the beginning part of November, and the surety obviously has the ability to put some pressure on the contractor to get the contractor to step it up and make better progress towards completing the project. And they've seemingly been successful, as indicated by several folks with respect to the additional activity that has been going on at the site over the last couple of weeks or so. The next step would be, in order to, recover the funds, would require termination of the contractor and then a formal claim on the performance bond and ask the surety to step in there. So if we were to do that, that would ultimately, there's pros and cons obviously associated with that. There's a number of different consequences. The most pressing, and I think potentially most negative adverse consequence that would be suffered is that there would be a delay in at least 3 to 4 months or so in order to get a new contractor on the job. So ultimately, at this point, given the progress that is being made, it would be potentially certainly detrimental to the schedule if the town were to take that next step. And as indicated, the intention is to continue to document any claims that the town has in order to preserve those for the purposes of engaging in negotiation or some other claims resolution process, whether that's mediation, arbitration, or litigation, once the job is complete. But the focus right now for, I think, all of us up here is to get the job done and then worry about the recovery after that's completed.
I'm just going to have Richard down front have a chance.
Thanks, Richard Robinson again. We heard from the library board that they wanted to go to town meeting, for which I'm quite grateful. I would urge the selectmen to rethink their decision if you don't want to ask the town for borrowing, because in fact you have that authority already. I really strongly urge you to go to the town and ask for a sense of the meeting to support that motion. To do otherwise, I think, is risking the ongoing trust of the taxpayers for future projects. This may be a high-risk position to put yourselves in, but I think it's worth it, and I think that's what politics is for, is to convince people who aren't sure that you're doing the right thing.
Bill?
Bill Vaughn, 145 Mason Hill Road. The only thing that has been concerning me is that the idea that we thought we were going to maybe spend up to 7.4 million or borrow that. If we really thought that, why were those contingencies included? That suggests the library could have been 12 million or so. So I think we should be honest with ourselves. We thought 1 million would be spent or borrowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Are there other questions or comments people would like to offer up this evening? Yes.
Joe Carchidi again, 33 Woodland Street. First a comment. The comment is I expected to hear a lot more at this meeting about how things were going to be different relative to getting the work completed. And much of the meeting has been spent talking about funding sources and details of numbers and so forth, which of course are important. But I'm leaving with the feeling that we're going to do more of the same, expecting a different result. And that the town is on the hook for an open-ended project that will finish when it finishes and cost whatever it costs. More of a comment than a question, but that's how it feels to me.
Are there any other comments or questions this evening? I think, not seeing any, Mary Moore would like to make a few closing comments on behalf of all of us here.
So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Can you hear me? I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know this project has been near and dear to many of our hearts for a long time. I want to thank Charlie Williams for quoting Robert Frost. I've been using that expression a lot lately, which is, the best way through is always out. The best way out is always through, I apologize. And I shared that with Elizabeth in an email the other day. We will get this done. We will continue to push as hard as we can to get the people who we're paying to get this project done for us done. I'm really grateful for the support of the town on the project. And, to the most recent question, we've been putting a press on. And I would encourage anybody, if you want to come to any of our trustee or LDC meetings, they're all posted, the minutes are all posted. I appreciate the select board's partnership with this. We have already identified some additional ways to defray the 2.2 million, and we'll continue to do our best to keep defraying it as far as we can. So thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry, George, if there are questions, I took a lot of notes tonight, and if there were some questions where we didn't have a specific answer, we will update the FAQ and post an updated version on the website next week.
And I want to commend certainly the people who've been working on the various committees, the people on the stage here, and others who are on these boards for not only putting this program together this evening, but the work that they are doing. It's a difficult time. My impression is they're working their way through it as best as can be done. A lot of very worthwhile questions and comments tonight, which I'm sure they're paying attention to. And a particular thanks to all of you for taking the time to come out and to listen and to ask. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you and good night.